The world of information is enormous and trust is more important than ever. Today, I wanted to go through a post by noted anti-vaccine content creator Steve Kirsch and highlight why I think even a person with just a little bit of knowledge in the realm of health science can justifiably put them into the low trust camp. For just a quick 20-second introduction into Steve Kirsch, he's an entrepreneur. He got rich to the tune of hundreds of millions quite a while ago, and evidently somewhere along the way, he's become one of the biggest anti-vaccine content creators on the internet. Notable recent-ish public appearance. He did a 2v2 debate against Professor Dave Explains and Dr. Wilson from Debunk the Funk. I'll link that one in the description. I think the pro-vaccine camp won the debate, though I link it there so you can make your own decision. But in any case, here is the post in question. So Steve has put a screenshot of an email here and he's describing it. He says, "My email to MIT Professor Choi. I wonder how she will respond because there is no other way to explain the data. I predict she will say, I have no idea." Now let's go through the actual email. So he says, "Hi, Professor Choi, we've met before. I recently was introduced to the owner of an autism treatment specialty practice that has had great success in recovering autistic kids. They have over 1,000 families in their practice. They sent out a survey to all the parents recently, asking additional questions to get a better handle on the makeup of their client base. They got 186 responses, which they thought was an excellent response rate for an email. They discovered that in 40% of respondents, the regression happened very, very rapidly. The child was developing normally and then a sudden severe regression. The regression referring presumably to, an increase in autism symptoms. In 40% of those cases, the regression happened within 2 days after a vaccination, and 76% of the cases happened within 2 weeks after vaccination. So I'm just putting some quick math on the board so you can see the absolute numbers. The p-value he presents is very low. So it didn't, and he says this, so it didn't happen by chance. Something caused it. Since you're an expert in autism, I thought I'd ask you what you think is the most likely cause of the observed correlation." Steve. So Steve has made a big claim here based on the information he has presented to the audience with this screenshot and his prelude to the email, that vaccines causing autism is the only explanation for the data. And the reason this example it hit so hard for me is this is a person who has over 500,000 followers on X. He's really big in the anti-vax space. He claims expertise on the subject matter, and he makes a very big claim. No other explanation other than presumably vaccines causing autism, and yet he's missing a foundational and very simple principle of science that could definitely explain these results relating to how populations are sampled. It's the type of thing you learn in undergraduate health science degrees, and many people are at least somewhat familiar with it, even without going through any sort of health science degree. And primarily, it comes down to selection bias. We have two easy to identify potential sources for selection bias here. One is at the clinic level, where if for some reason this clinic in particular has a high percentage of parents who have had this experience relative to the general population, that would be a biased sample. And then there's selection bias at the level of responses to the survey as well, where people self-select to respond to the survey. People who have these kinds of beliefs or who have genuinely had these experiences around the time that their child was vaccinated, they may be more passionate about the subject and respond at higher rates. And so you can very much imagine this. One, many vaccines are administered in that 12 to 24 month period, and this is also the period where many parents might conceivably start to notice symptoms of autism in their children, and also this is when a lot of autism screening can tend to take place as well. Two, therefore, there will be a chance overlap between when parents start to first notice symptoms and when their child gets the vaccine. Three, this population of parents, they might concentrate at particular clinics for numerous reasons. If the clinic itself purposefully attracts clientele with these experience or beliefs, and there can be other reasons as well, but we can't tell for certain based off the information presented by Steve. And then four, these parents may be more likely to respond to a survey because they conceivably feel more passionate on the subject. So with that, I think it's very clearly possible that there is another explanation for this data other than vaccines having caused it. I think very clearly, especially with a single clinic, it's very possible there are sample bias alone can explain the results. And given sample bias is a pretty beginner-friendly topic in health science, and while I have no problem in general um, with a person who this may not be intuitive to, when a person who is claiming expertise on the topic preaches to a large audience with such high certainty attached to a very simple analysis, and they miss this they miss this very simple reason for why it can be by chance, at least given the details that Steve's chosen to provide, that rings to me as a red flag that this person may not know as much as they're letting on. There are also many more things that can be at play. For instance, if the items on the survey were worded in a way that leads parents to answer in a specific way, leading questions, the biases of the parents themselves, a problem in all self-report data, where how can you tell the parents out there who have genuinely had these things coincide versus those who haven't? The fact that formal autism screening can very often happen around the time of vaccination, and that might be a signal for the parent to start noticing certain behaviors and could be a part of why one might form the perception of it being a rapid regression. We've all had the experience where, I don't know, you get something new, maybe a new car or some sort of new item, or you learn a new thing and then suddenly you start noticing it everywhere. Even though we had never noticed it before, that type of thing can be at play as well. Now, no single study can address all of the potential avenues for bias, which is why what we really need is a body of evidence in order to directly answer a question like, do vaccines cause autism? And that a very large body of evidence exists, which further highlights to me why representing a single small survey with many methodological details missing, it's not a published or peer-reviewed study as far as I'm aware, and representing that as only leading to one conclusion is a big red flag to me, reduces my trust in this person as a science communicator and as a good source of unbiased information on the topic in general. There is another wrinkle, though, in trying to figure out who we can or who we should and shouldn't trust, and it's that anybody can make isolated, obvious mistakes, especially if they're posting a lot of content. Even for very smart, competent people, that happens. So one post like this it's never definitive evidence that this person isn't a trustworthy source, but we only have so much time, and we can't go through a person's entire body of work to see our perception of the spread of their material's quality. So the challenge is that it's hard to come up with exact rules for who to trust and who not to trust when you have yourself potentially biased samples of a person's content. Pretty much everyone will come into contact with, which is why mental shortcuts and principles become critically important at a non-science practical level when deciding who to trust. And I think the overarching one for me is getting the balance right between a justified confidence given your level of evidence and being ready to update your belief as well. So, for instance, you might see a person's content for the first time and think it's really very biased and unthoughtful, and you can simultaneously hold these beliefs. One, I see no reason to give this person more time or trust. And in fact, I now distrust them. And two, this post may not be representative of their content, or I may misunderstand something, and so I will remain open to updating my belief. We can move in the world as if we have chosen correctly and take decisive action at the same time as acknowledging it's possible we have chosen incorrectly, and therefore be open to updating our belief, though we aren't necessarily obligated to look more into anything in particular. It's just depending on the topic's importance to you. There are other complexities as well, right? Like how to weight a person's character versus their perceived competence, or what type of actions in particular should erode trust more. And trying to bring clarity to that space is a big part of what I want to do with this channel. I want to help map out what a path to reliably justified trust in expertise looks like. Because, in an increasingly complicated world where we rely on experts for almost everything, healthcare, education, and policy decisions, there ought to be a guide that anybody can follow, like an evergreen kind of framework that helps us decide who to trust. If you would like to explore that with me, then please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notifications for when I release a new video, and I will see you next time.